It's always a pleasure to be able to come to city councils and just be able to interact with you, hear what's going on in your cities, and outside of my normal interacting with you on a regular basis. But it's really a great opportunity to be here today and see some of you that I don't get to see on a regular basis. So let's see here. This is what I'm going to cover with you today. I'm just going to do a quick introduction and overview of the League of California Cities. I'll do a quick federal legislative update and then a state legislative update. So diving right in, our infrastructure, we have a team of lobbyists and policy analysts in Sacramento that work to advocate for you every day. We also have a network of 16 regional managers in the state. Of course, I'm one of them. I'm your East Bay Regional Public Affairs Manager. I work with the 33 cities in Alameda and Contra Costa counties. And I have counterparts all around the state who live and work in their divisions, who work with their respective mayors and council members and city management. We have 7 different policy committees at the League, anything ranging in issue area from environmental quality to housing to transportation, public safety, revenue and taxation, that set our policy agenda. They make recommendations to our board of directors. Our board of directors then, ratifies whatever the recommendation is, and those are our marching orders as staff as far as advocacy is concerned. We have 5 diversity caucuses at the League that you can engage in. They have networking and educational events on a regular basis. And then 10 professional departments, mayors and council members, city managers, public works, city clerks, city attorneys, and fire chiefs, and they have their own leadership structure and educational conferences as well. I wanted to take a moment to thank the mayor for her involvement, and you've served in leadership capacities in the past with the division, so thank you. And I also want to thank Councilmember Kavanaugh, who is currently serving on a policy committee for the League of California Cities, and to all of you for just engaging in advocacy and having your voice at the table. It really is important having your voices there, and I'd be remiss if I didn't also mention working with your very talented city staff, Sarah, John, Kevin, Pierce. I hope I'm not leaving anybody out, but I do get to interact with you on a regular basis as well, and I really appreciate your perspective. As I noted, we do advocacy for you in Sacramento at the legislative level. Also at the federal level, you're going to hear we've been really active at the federal level this year given COVID-19. We do legal advocacy for cities, ballot advocacy. Some of you are familiar with City PAC. It's our issues PAC. We don't have a candidate PAC at the League of Cities, but City PAC we do raise funds for our very famous bocce tournament, which we've had to cancel for the 2nd time now because of COVID.
Oh, boo.
I know. Hopefully we'll be back next year.
A good excuse to go to Livermore.
I know, which I have other sad news, that facility closed, but it's turning into something different that will still have bocce apparently. So yeah, another victim of the
fingers crossed.
Yes. And we have divisions. Again, I'm one of 16. We have periodic meetings. I have my division meetings every other month. We try to bring something timely and relevant to you. We're excited about our May 27th division meeting. We've invited our congressional representatives to come and address us. We're really taking advantage of being in a virtual environment. They'll be 3 hours ahead in DC, but we're hoping that they'll be able to join us for a quick update. So again, May 27th, I hope to see you guys then. The California Civic Leadership Institute is a program that actually, when I used to work in the Sacramento office for the League of Cities, I used to manage this program. It's for city officials who are looking to run for the state legislature. And that was a really fun program for me in getting to know some of our East Bay legislators. Actually, we do have some alumni out here. In fact, Rob Bonta, who's now appointed Attorney General, was an alumni of the program. We also have a League Partners program at the League. It's kind of like a corporate partners program for businesses and associations that do regular work with cities. And once we really get back into in-person meetings and conferences, you'll see those folks around more. So every year, our leadership comes together to talk about what we want our strategic priorities to be for the year. And you'll find those listed here. The first priority is secure state and federal funding for local COVID-19 health response. I look forward to sharing some successes in that regard with you in a few slides ahead. Priority 2, secure funding for housing and homelessness. Priority 3, improve state, local coordination and planning to strengthen community disaster preparedness, resiliency, and recovery. We've had so many wildfires that just have been devastating over the last few years. And, you know, not only just fires, but California is pretty susceptible to numerous disasters. So this is something very important to all of us. And then 4, protect and modernize critical infrastructure. I also wanted to note, while it wasn't identified as a priority, it's a very important initiative of the League is our advancing equity effort. And we have both an internal effort of staff, which I'm on the internal working group, and we also have an external advancing equity committee of about 20 diversity officials from all over the state who came together and actually presented just this last week at our board meeting some recommendations moving forward. And so now we as staff are going to come up with an action plan of ways that we can help cities moving forward. Things like providing you with tools so that you can conduct assessments in your own city, a toolkit with resources, both of lots of existing resources that are already there in place that you can use, and also new resources that we might come up with, and then just implementing regular education, whether it's at conferences, webinars, or at our division meetings. So that's also an important effort that I'm really excited about. Okay, moving to a federal update. The American Rescue Plan Act was signed, I think, by the president on March 10th or 11th. In that plan, there was $350 billion that's going to go to state and local governments for emergency relief. You'll see the number here. The numbers, you know, bulleted out. $130 billion is slated to go to cities and counties. Another pot of money that cities really care about is that $10 billion capital project fund. We understand that that will eventually be available for broadband grants. In regards to that pot of money for local governments, there's $65 billion in relief to cities, towns, and villages. Here is the estimate for what we anticipate Piedmont to get. Yes, it's an estimate because we're waiting on Treasury to put out their final numbers, but we don't anticipate that they're going to change much. We're also waiting on Treasury to put out their final guidelines for how the funding can be used. We do know that in the legislation, they did identify that it can be used for revenue loss and for necessary infrastructure investments like water, sewer, broadband. They also identified that it cannot be used for pension payments. They did let us know that they're going to deliver it in 2 tranches, 12 months apart. The first tranche is slated to be 60 days after signing, so very soon, we hope. And then the second will be 12 months later. And you do need to spend this money, figure out how you're going to spend it, because if you don't spend it by December 31st, 2024, it would need to be returned to Treasury at that point. I want to thank you for being a partner in advocacy for this. We worked very hard to get direct and flexible funding for cities, and your voices definitely helped us get to this point. We do know that while this helps, it doesn't solve everyone's fiscal woes. And so we do have an eye on the state's windfall as well. And we are advocating for funding for cities in the state budget as well. Okay, let's talk state legislation here. So Councilmember Kavanaugh serves on our Environmental Quality Policy Committee, so she knows quite a few of these bills very well. This is an important bill that we are working very closely with Senator Laird's office on. This is SB 619. We're working to get cities some reprieve, such as a delay in implementation or enforcement for SB 1383, which requires the state to reduce organic waste disposal, so food waste, green waste, paper products, by 75% by 2025. And while we want to be a partner in achieving this, and we definitely agree that it's important to achieve this, we know that it's going to be incredibly hard and costly to comply with this in the short time frame that they've provided. So we're working with the author's office on this bill to give you some breathing room. We don't have an official position just because the negotiations have been dynamic and ongoing, but we do have a support and concept letter. I'm happy to report that this bill made it out of the Senate Environmental Quality Policy Committee last week. We have a couple senators from the East Bay who serve on that committee, Senators Skinner and Wachowski. So they can definitely be thanked for helping move the conversation along as far as this bill is concerned. And we'll keep you posted on how you can help it move along as well. So there are a few bonds this year in the legislature, and some of them are carried over from last year. Last year was a very strange legislative cycle. Obviously, it was abbreviated because of COVID-19. So it's kind of questionable with some of these that have been carried over, really what the political will be in moving them forward. But you'll see a few of these just as a heads up throughout my presentation. These two happen to address things like safe drinking water, flood protection, drought preparation, and issues like that. So SB 612, this relates to the allocation of legacy resources and community choice aggregators, or CCAs. Specifically, SB 612 would ensure fair and equal access to the benefits of legacy resources and ensure that resources held in investor-owned utility portfolios are managed to maximize value for customers. We continue to support fair competition in statewide energy markets for CCAs, and we work to ensure that legislation and regulatory policies protect CCA customers from improper cost allocations. So there are quite a few bills around sea level rise in the legislature this year. This is an example of one. This bill that we support, SB 1, would set up a grant program that will help local governments update your local plans to take into account sea level rise. So a law recently sunsetted to allow, and I never thought I would find myself talking about treated wood waste, but here I am. A law recently sunsetted to allow treated wood waste to be disposed of in a responsible and environmental manner in more local landfills, which leaves only one option: to take all of the state's treated wood waste to a location that's hours away in Buttonwillow. It's somewhere in the Central Valley, is my understanding. So this bill seeks to continue to allow that alternative management standard to remain, so that we can continue to take treated wood waste and make sure that it's put into lined areas of the landfill and be environmentally responsibly done away with. So disaster preparedness, obviously, yes, is a big topic of discussion the last few years, especially in the legislature. And there are quite a few bills we've seen over the last few years around wildfires, especially. These two bills here look at during the wildfire season, we see power shutoffs and de-energization. These bills look at that term and deem de-energization an emergency in and of itself. So that helps provide public agencies in accessing resources that will help sensitive and vulnerable populations during this time, which, you know, when the power is shut off, a lot of times we find ourselves having to make sure that people who, you know, are using important medical devices and things like that are taken care of. So these bills will help provide resources to you in doing so moving forward. SB 109, this is a bill we support. This creates the Office of Wildfire Technology Research, and it really helps us to work in the future toward making us more streamlined and tech savvy as far as tackling and preparing for disasters. So let's cut to transportation, communication, and public works. These first couple bills I'm going to talk about are two bills that we support that seek to make reforms to the California Advanced Services Fund. It seeks to extend the fund beyond the 2022 sunset, and also would make it easier for cities to be able to access those funds. With COVID-19, we have really seen where gaps are in our communities as far as access to broadband. And so I know that many of you want to help to fill those as well. So please join us in supporting AB 14 and SB 4. Again, I noted that there were several bonds in the legislature. There's one around broadband as well. Again, I'm not sure what the political will is going to be for this, but this is something that we support in concept. You'll see the second bullet down there notes that within this, it would reserve 25% of the funding for unserved or disadvantaged communities. And that's just a bit of feedback that we are giving, is that we'd like to see that pot of money greater for unserved and disadvantaged communities. All right, SB 556. This bill deals with wireless broadband infrastructure and would require local governments to make space available on streetlight poles, traffic poles, utility poles, etc., to telecommunication providers, contrary to the local authority you now have under federal law. It also places more restrictions around the fees that you can charge. We have an opposed position on this bill. We're working to get it to a better, more palatable place. And it did pass out of the Senate Energy, Utilities, and Communications Committee, I think a couple of weeks ago. It now heads to the Appropriations Committee on May 10th. So if that's something you'd like to have a voice on, please get your letters in on that. So SB 341, this bill deals with telecommunication outages and would require that providers maintain a public outage map on their websites, and also would require backup power to allow service for 72 hours after the outage. And this was especially important. You heard of a lot of cases during the last fire season of people not having cell service and things like that. So this would help in that regard if we had that backup power. Okay, SB 640. This is an interesting bill. So this tackles a problem that I didn't even know really existed, but it's good to know. This bill allows you to essentially do transportation projects with your neighbor. It authorizes cities and counties to jointly submit proposed SB1 projects. We support this bill and think that it'd be a good way for cities to be able to use your SB1 dollars and get creative with other neighboring jurisdictions. Housing is always a special subject at the League of California Cities, it seems, in the last few years. This year is no exception. So there are a number of bills around that seek to require cities to allow housing developments on retail and commercial lots, such as SB 6 here, that we oppose. But they don't take into account the loss of sales tax and other revenues that cities rely on when this happens. So we've been working proactively with Senator Portantino on this bill, SB 15, which would create a new program under HCD to provide incentives in the form of grants allocated to local governments that rezone idle or retail commercial sites to instead allow the development of workforce housing. So we're working very closely with this office. I believe we're a co-sponsor on this bill and support SB 15. SB 9. This bill would require a local government to ministerially approve a housing development containing duplexes in single family zones, and would require local governments to ministerially approve urban lot splits. We have an oppose unless amended position on this bill. And in our oppose unless amended letter, you can find some of the things that we're asking for, things like allowing local governments to require adequate access for police, fire, other emergency vehicles and equipment, prohibiting developers from developing in high fire severity zones, allowing cities to determine the range of lot sizes suitable for SB 9 projects, ensuring that you get RENA credit for the production of SB 9 units, just to name a few. You can find our oppose unless amended sample letter on our website. SB 10, this bill authorizes a local government to zone parcels located in transit and job-rich areas or on urban infill sites for up to 10 units of residential density per parcel. We don't have a position on this. It's optional for cities. Cities can opt in and do this if they want. So we don't really see it as an issue, but we are watching it just to make sure that there aren't any amendments or anything that we'd be concerned about. This next bill, AB 1322, you may recall this was a Bonta bill, and then Bonta became Attorney General. And so with his package of bills, there were some legislators that were able to take some of his bills and author them. So this is another opt-in bill, actually. This bill essentially creates a legal pathway for a city or county to determine if any locally approved measures are in conflict with state law. Again, it's an opt-in bill, optional for cities, and we have a watch position on it. SB 5, this is another housing bond. Doesn't seem to be moving terribly quickly, but just another bond out there to kind of give you an idea of all the bond related bills that are moving. AB 602. We've been working very closely with the author's office on this, Assembly Member Grayson. He's actually a former city official from the East Bay, from Concord. So we're working with him to make sure there would be no caps set on fees associated with developments, because we know that that's important revenue for you in mitigating any impacts to your city. This bill does not do that, thankfully, but it more focuses on reporting and transparency of how and why the fees are levied. So we have an opposed unless amended position at this point, but working with his office to try to get to a neutral. SB 344, this is a grant program so that homeless shelters can better accommodate unhoused persons who show up with dogs. We have a support position on this bill. AB 71, this bill closes a corporate tax loophole to generate funding to go toward long-term solutions for homelessness. We have a watch position on this bill at this point. AB 1220, this bill we have a support position on. In fact, our board, I believe, just did that this last week. This bill works toward better aligning homelessness programs and clearly establishes a state-appointed leader on homelessness. So again, we have a support position on AB 1220. Okay, I have just a couple subject areas left, bear with me. Governance, transparency, and labor relations. I'm just going to share one bill that we have a concern on in this area, SB 278. This bill would require public agencies to directly pay retirees disallowed retirement benefits using general fund dollars. It would place 100% of that total liability for such overpayments on public agencies, which was a responsibility that was previously held by CalPERS to ensure that retirement benefits are calculated and administered correctly. So please join us in sending letters of opposition on SB 278. And last, I'll touch on a couple of public safety bills. And both of them are related to mental health. This has been a huge topic of conversation in the East Bay and also in Alameda County. AB 988, this bill establishes a mental health crisis hotline. We support this bill. And AB 785, this bill establishes a grant program to provide flexible funds to local governments to develop programs that seek improvements in handling mental health emergencies in the criminal justice space. We have a support position on this bill as well. And if you are thoroughly enjoying yourself and you want more legislative updates, you can go online to ciecities.org/events and you'll find information about a webinar tomorrow morning. You'll get 2 hours worth of bills from our lobbyists from 9:30 to 11:30. So please join us for that. It'll help key us up for our legislative action days, which is next week. We have programs slated for Wednesday and Thursday morning as general sessions, where you'll get updates from our lobbyists and leadership, as well as leadership from the legislature and the administration. So that's next, the 12th and the 13th, I believe. And then I'm setting up legislative meetings, and I'll be in touch as those are scheduled if you plan to attend some of those meetings next week. So that's it from me. Again, thank you so very much for having me. I appreciate it. Happy to answer any questions. And if I don't have the answer you need right now, I can always, get back to you.